I just want to say we're so passionate about classic movies.
We're going to expand the conversation.
You can see the passion that's in this room.
It's thrilling to the core.
Put a new spin on some vintage films.
It's classic movies and more.
Hi, I'm here with Bob Furmanek from 3D Archives. Hi, Bob. Welcome.
How are you, Rob?
Pretty good. Good to see you again. Good to see you again. Tell us about your latest release.
Well, our latest release is GOG, 1954 science fiction film produced by Ivan Tors, directed and edited by Herbert L. Strock. And it's a terrific Cold War kind of detective espionage film with science fiction in the background. And it's got robots, which is very exciting. And it's for us a great thrill because probably more so than any other project we've restored, this one was the most personal for me and the most challenging for Greg Kintz, our technical director.
Why the most personal for you? How so?
Well, when I began my 3D restoration efforts, way back in the early 1980s, when you were just a baby.
I was 2.
Yeah. I was a little older. And I had gotten involved in the repertory scene in New York with revivals. And I found that films that had been available to book in 3D for 1 year were not available the following year. And in one case, the studio junked a very nice original left-right 35mm of it came from outer space, classic science fiction film. So I began realizing that the studios and the copyright holders were not being very proactive with keeping these prints available for theaters to book and for people to see. And my whole idea was, film is great, but it needs to be out there, and it's not going to reach new people and young people if they can't see it on the big screen as the filmmakers intended. And 3D in particular couldn't be shown on television unless it was converted to the really bad red and blue anaglyphic system, which never works. So the only way to see it was really theatrically. And if studios weren't keeping the prints, I said, okay, I've got to start tracking these things down. And I'd already had experience with film restoration. I worked at a lab in New Jersey that did a lot of nitrate film restoration. So I started looking, and in 1984 I moved to Los Angeles to work for Jerry Lewis. And when I was out there, Jerry's name opened a lot of doors for me at archives and studios and labs and vaults. And while I was in there doing work for Jerry, I was also looking for 3D material, and found some really amazing films that would have been lost if I hadn't been in the right place at the right time. Well, while I was out there, I used to do a lot of work for Jerry in the old Technicolor building in Hollywood. And Herbert L. Strock, the director of GOG, was still very active, and he maintained an office in the building. And he was really good about being there for the UCLA students to come in and talk to him about the art of filmmaking and his experiences in the business. And I got to talking to him about GOG, and he told me he was very proud of his work on it, used color and 3D very effectively, but he was very saddened that it didn't exist. So I looked into it at MGM-UA and confirmed the only material they had was from the right side. You have to remember, every 3D print, an element, you need a left side and a right side. The cameras were about 2.5 inches apart and recorded the shot from 2 different angles, and that's how you got to 3D. So GOG became a primary goal for me to find. And at that time, I didn't have a lot of money. I was struggling, and the best I could afford were these little quarter-page ads in the Big Reel, which was a film collector's magazine. And I ran it for years without getting any real bites. So one day I get the Big Reel, and I open it up, and there's a full-page ad, wanted 3D. looking for prints. And I said, okay, this is interesting. Who's looking for prints now as well? Turned out it was somebody in Northern California with very deep pockets. And their intent was to find these prints and not necessarily save them or preserve them, but bicycle them around theaters and libraries and put a tour together. So I said, if there's anything I can do to help, please, keep me in the loop on this. So I would check in a few times a year just to see if they had more luck than I did. They obviously had more money to find and advertise.
That helps.
It definitely did. So I called one day, and he said, no, he said somebody offered me a print, but it didn't sound like a good film, so we passed on it. I said, what was the film? He said, it's something to do with robots. So I thought, well, that narrows it down to either Robot Monster. And I said, is that the film? He said, no, it had a one-word title. I said, was it Gog? He said, yeah, that was the one. He said, nah, we looked it up in the Leonard Maltin TV book. Sounded like not a very good film, so we passed on it. Mm-hmm. So my next question was, do you remember who had it? He said, no, we didn't keep a record of it. So we modified our ad from being a list of 30 or 40 titles to focus on just a handful, with Gog being very prominent. Right across the top, large font, we put a little poster of the film on there to get your attention.
Very reminiscent of one of these, huh?
Kind of, yeah. And it worked. A few months after we put our revised ad in, I got a call, and it was a collector in Atlanta who was claiming to have a print. So I flew down, inspected it, turned out to be a complete left side, which was the one that was lost, and bought it. And that, to go a long way to answer your question, what makes this restoration so personal for me is that had that not happened, and had I not found the print, Gog would be a lost 3D film today. So it's very rewarding. And it's especially gratifying to get a chance to restore it and now have everyone get to see it and share in what I think is a very underrated film. Mm-hmm. And a very high quality 3D film that virtually nobody has seen. Even in 1954, when it was released in theaters, only 5 theaters played it in 3D.
Wow. And
it was pulled and was seen flat, basically everywhere except Southern California. It was seen flat. So in a way, 62 years later, this is the 3D premiere for Gog, and that's pretty exciting.
Wow, yeah, it's amazing you can go back and rehash it and have it all new again, like it has never happened.
I'd like to think Herbert Strock would be very pleased
cool.
To see it out there, and the restoration is really the most challenging thing that Greg Kintz had to work on, because the left eye was completely faded, and he was able to not only bring back most of the color, probably about 98% of it, but every single shot required color correction, flicker reduction, image stabilization. The left-right panels had to be perfectly matched. The vertical alignment had to be spot on. And usually one of our restorations takes about 3 months. This was 5.
Wow.
So it was a lot more difficult on a technical end. And then even after Greg finished his work, Thad Komorowski did additional dirt cleanup, especially the left print had a lot of wear. So he went in scene by scene and removed a lot of this little speckling and damage that was on the print. And I think it looks beautiful. I'm very, very proud of the way it turned out.
It's great. I'm sure our viewers are going to be anxious to see it. You mentioned Greg. Can you tell us a little about your company?
Well, the 3D Film Archive specializes in finding and restoring vintage 3D films. Greg Kintz is our technical director. He's based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And he's really a genius when it comes to taking these vintage elements. And when you've got a left and a right side, it's double the work. But he's the best I've ever seen at taking these and aligning them and fixing all the problems, even things that are kind of baked in from the original photography. he's able to manipulate. And it may sound like a cliche, but it's true that now on Blu-ray, they're looking better than they've ever looked before. And none of this would be happening without Greg's talent and expertise and passion, you know. And one of the nice things with somebody working on it with that kind of interest and dedication is they go the extra mile, you know, to make it the best it can be. And Greg's never fully satisfied with something. If he has a problem and it's not working, he'll keep at it and keep refining his techniques until it worked. I mean, even with GOG, a lot of shots gave him a great amount of difficulty. It's not easy restoring color to a faded film. Try to take a faded photo and go into Photoshop and try to bring the color back to it. It takes a lot of skill and finesse to make that work. And he pulled it off. When I looked at the final 3D Blu-ray of GOG, I was blown away. Never expected it to come back and look as good as it does.
Wow. So it's the best work he's done, you think, so far?
So far, he keeps topping himself. I don't know how much better he can get, but no, it's we're very proud of it, really.
Well, that's cool. You've had a lot of practice, Greg has, actually, working on some stuff. Why don't you take our viewers through some of your releases prior?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, our first one out of the gate was Dragonfly Squadron from Olive Films. This was a 1954 Korean War film that was never released in 3D, so our Blu-ray was the world premiere. The Bubble was our first release through Kino Lorber, and it's a 1966 science fiction movie written, produced, and directed by Arch Oboler of Lights Out radio fame. And a terrific little science fiction story, and it has some of the best off-screen 3D effects you'll ever see in a movie.
Such as?
Well, there's a scene in a bar where a tray
like it already,
of beer.
bar.
Yeah, it is a tray of beer that lifts off the bar and floats out and comes off the screen. And just when you think it can't get any closer to your nose, it swings even closer.
Wow.
And if you're sitting in a movie theater, it literally is hanging in air about 2 rows in front of you.
Wow.
Things like that, you know, a lot of fun. Arch Oboler was a great storyteller, and they incorporated those kind of off-screen effects into The Bubble that make it a lot of fun. And then 3D Rarities, which was our first release from Flickr Alley, and this was done to commemorate the centennial of the first documented 3D public exhibition on film in 1916. I'm sorry, 1915.
Wow.
And this is 2.5 hours of material that we've found that date back to the early 1920s. And it's a really great variety of 3D cartoons and newsreels and trailers and comedy shorts and documentaries. There's something for everybody.
And this was shown in the 20s and 30s and so on?
Well, the shorts, some of the shorts were.
How did the viewers see it back then? What was the difference in, let's say, viewing it now versus viewing it in 1920?
In the 1920s, the 3D system was called anaglyphic 3D, which used red and cyan glasses. And that was the system in place from the early 20s until about the mid-1930s. In 1936, Polarized 3D was first shown. And that's how all of the Golden Age features in the 50s were shown with polarized light. And they used sort of a gray filtered lens on the glasses, very similar to the Real D or Dolby 3D system today. Very high quality. And then in the 60s and 70s, some filmmakers went back to the anaglyphic because it was cheaper. And you didn't have to have a silver screen in the theater. You didn't have to have 2 projectors interlocked. Technically, it was a lot easier, but the quality really suffered. So it's kind of bounced around, and now we're back to, thankfully, all polarized 3D. The quality is much better.
Gotcha.
And our most recent release, also from our friends at Kino Lorber, is The Mask. It's a 1961 horror film, the first horror film shot in Canada, and the first Canadian feature to receive widespread distribution in the United States. It's a fascinating horror story about a ancient tribal mask and the effect it has on the poor souls who put the mask on. Exactly.
Gotcha.
And there's 3 different segments in 3D in the film that total about 15 minutes that are some of the best 3D ever put on film. Again, it's shot by people who knew what they were doing, and you put the mask on in the film, and that's your cue to put your glasses on. And this actually did use anaglyphic because it was easier in 1961. Mm-hmm. And we have restored it from the original left-right elements. So the Blu-ray has it in both discrete, polarized 3D or anaglyphic as a bonus feature if you want to see it that way. Mm-hmm. So that's been our output so far, and looking forward to adding GOG to this growing stack of 3D titles from the archive.
Sounds great. Where can our viewers go out and find it? Because I'm sure you whetted their appetite already.
Amazon is your easiest one-stop shopping place, but you can also go to the Kino Lorber website for the Bubble and the Mask and GOG, or the Flickr Alley website for 3D rarities. But if you want to get them all in one shot, Amazon would probably be your best choice.
You hear it, everybody? Amazon. Look that up. Take us through, since we're going to be checking out GOG in a little bit, take us through GOG. For those people who haven't seen it or heard about it, give us a little quick synopsis on it.
Well, it's an underground research facility in New Mexico, and they have 150 of the world's top scientists working on a super secret project to launch the first space station. And people suddenly start getting murdered. And we don't know who's doing it. Mm-hmm. Is it a saboteur? Or is it something a little more devious from maybe one of our not so friendly neighbors? Or is it somebody from another world? I won't tell you, you'll have to see the film to kind of get the answer to that. But it's a really fun slice of early 50s, kind of Cold War, very scientific. Ivan Tors, the producer, was a huge science fiction fan. And he didn't like to go with aliens and monsters and things like that. He wanted his films, much like science fiction theater, his TV show, to kind of be based on actual principles of science. Mm-hmm. And then the fiction would come from there. And I think GOG is a great time capsule of its period, and I think people are going to be very surprised with it when they get a chance to see it.
What's your plan for release? Are you going to take it on tour, or what's the agenda?
Well, the Blu-ray is out March 1st. We've got a couple of very high-profile theatrical dates lined up, which I can't announce yet because the venue that's hosting it gets to make the premiere announcement.
So like GOG, it's top secret, huh?
It is top secret. Mm-hmm. But I will say that one of them is an event we've been trying to get into for the past couple of years, and it's really exciting that GOG is going to be our premier entry in this particular festival.
And you'll update everybody on your website, right?
Absolutely. And
and that website is?
3dfilmarchive.com.
Okay.
The number 3, not the word.
Gotcha.
So